So I help companies really figure out what their strategy is, how they actually could align their data strategy and their cybersecurity strategy to what they actually want to do with their business, and execute in a way that helps them earn money while they're doing that, scale and be compliant. And here you see a couple of the companies I have worked with over my career. So that's who I am. And I started D3M Labs about 10 years ago, and it was a consulting company working with some of the clients you saw on the last slide. And about 2 years ago, I started, talking at conferences in the way I'm doing now, and people actually were really drawn to my message. How can we actually make money out of data in this country? In the startup scene, but also in the German industry. A lot of buzz about AI, but maybe not a lot of profitable business, not a lot of German IP going out in the world when it gets to AI. So how do we actually change that strategy and operations about how we make digital business in AI?
The overwhelming majority has the university degree and the master's degree. And samples again dominated by these individual contributors, not managers. And I'll give you a few specifics about the AI items with some descriptive statistics. Stack Overflow asks the developer community, so okay, there is this AI, and it looks like it's going to have an impact. In which of these domains you think it's going to have an impact, right? And the top one, and these are the people, these are the developers who already endorse that AI is going to have a very, very high impact. So when you filter out to that particular endorsement option in the survey, again, the majority says AI is going to change the coding practices for us, right? And if you break it down into the age groups, again, the majority are the younger people. They also say that AI is going to impact the debugging, code and getting help, as well as documentation, right? So, again, when you ask these developers, obviously from last year, their most popular AI-powered search tool is ChatGPT, followed by Bing and Google Bard, with different names now. And when it comes to developer tools, obviously, again, Copilot, GitHub Copilot dominates amongst these developers. So, this should sort of depict you the broader picture when it comes to, Stack Overflow being replaced by, or potentially being replaced by the LLMs. And so I don't know if this is going to be something like Microsoft complaining about Linux, but then eventually, embracing Linux itself. But obviously, there's a competition aspect of this as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam. I'm a lead data scientist at Yelp, and I've worked in data science, machine learning, AI, whatever the newest type word is at the time, since 2012. I have a master's in statistics, and I've worked in like 8 different industries, from private education research to technology to German legal individual rights.
I'm a former academic, switched to the private industry 2 years ago. My background is also in statistics, in these exploratory models. And my specialization is measurement tool development, both with text data and survey data with tabular data. So that's about me, I guess.
Okay, great. And so I've been an external consultant at corporations, working with them on their big data or AI innovation initiatives. I've also been a director of data at certain Berlin scale-ups, so I've been actually the one who's had budget responsibility and P&L responsibility for the data department and making money out of data. So also I have had my hands-on experience comes from finance. I started my career as a risk management consultant and strategist and worked my way through Dell and the marketing department. So I've always been on this edge of money and data.
It's just always important to define and to remember that generative AI, if you're predicting the next word, right, that's still probabilistic modeling. So it's not like it's so far different from other types of models. Like in the end, you're fitting a model to some data that you're trying to represent and use to solve some kind of problem.
Okay, thanks. So how has generative AI actually changed how you develop?
So my workplace, we don't actually use it like generative AI to produce something, but we will use the proprietary version we use to help with coding and this kind of thing. It's useful. Yeah, I don't have to look through 1,000 Stack Overflow posts that may or may not be conflicting each other, and I can give a broad but specific enough way to define a coding problem, and then it can help me simplify that. So that's been the main use case for me.
I would echo that basically. I can only talk about my personal experience. Yeah, I think since this coding helpers, coding assistants became prominent, I spend 90% of my time with them, and maybe 10% of my time still going through Stack Overflow or similar platforms. It basically, I think, makes you more productive in the sense of you take less time to actually write the code or debug the code or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think it's all about how you break down the problem into reasonable logical steps and how you approach each of those steps with the code. That's how effective. That's how it changed. Time-wise, yes, more productive. Still, you gotta know what you're doing, right? I have, again, there's this joke, I'm sure you came across that yourself, that's your experience. It generates you some perfectly usable code, and it's like, efficient and all that. You can even deploy it, you can have it in production, and then just to mess with it, you say like, oh, actually that doesn't work. And it apologizes and gives you the wrong code after that. So you gotta know what you're doing, but time-wise, effective. More productive, for sure, yeah.
I think this is a great segue into the next question. How do you deal with the fact, so when you're using the enterprise versions, or if you're not using an on-premise model, how do you deal with the fact that you are using this generative AI tool and you don't have control over the input?
Anything, right? You need to use like common sense, and checking, like fact checking is a skill. So for my workplace, we're not allowed to use like the true open source version. We are only allowed to use the company one. But think about like with any model, think about like what is your average use case? What are the like edge cases that you're also worried about, and see how does it do in these settings. It's kind of like you have to use your output to test how good the input is, or where it will do well and where it will not. Like in the beginning, like last January, the ChatGPT could correctly tell you things about prime numbers, and then 6 months later it could not. So, right, you need to think about people are also entering information that's just it's scraping from all these things all over the web, that are not correct, or a lot of things are opinions anyways. It's also probably a much more heavy tool from certain countries than from others. So with anything, you need to think about how can I use my output to backtrack the input, because if it's online, it's probably been included in the model in some way, but it doesn't mean that it will do a good job for your specific use case.
I always think about, a company as also being a body of knowledge, as developers or managers or whoever, the company is gathering knowledge, generating knowledge in the way it works. And I feel like with generative AI, there's this, okay, what is productivity versus this human knowledge and creativity that we want to generate? And I know that there's a lot of talk, for example, in radiology, just going out of the tech industry and into another industry that is very impacted. That there's a lot of radiologists who are retiring, and some people are, and young people are not choosing to go into radiology at the same rate because they're afraid of computer vision overtaking that. And what concerns me is that in 200 years, right, where we're going to not have radiologists, we're just going to have computer models, and our human knowledge of radiology is going to be frozen in time, maybe to 20 years from today. And is there, if you take that to a company, if you automate something, if you trust generative AI to do something, does your team and does your organization lose that knowledge? And how do you counterbalance this productivity gain versus maybe lack of gain in knowledge for doing that task?
I would say it's helping you be more efficient so you can focus on the more important problems. Like, we don't need to always do something that can then be automated. Great, then we can focus on something more important like the climate or whatever, instead of filling out 1,000 pieces of paper or something so I think it's going to always just help create more productivity. Obviously there will be a lot of hype and people using it for other use cases, but I don't think it's going to suddenly be like, oh, there aren't any radiologists anymore. Like, that would be a different source. It's meant to be a supplement and make people more efficient, and I don't think it would actually in any way, I mean, okay, maybe if you're like a copywriter, it'll take your job, but in a lot of other cases it's just meant to help so we can focus on the more important, more technical problems.
The job ads seem to be like they're looking for snowflakes, is what I say. The companies, if you look at technical and even some non-technical jobs, they have the exact tools that they're using in that specific company, the exact industry knowledge, and you should also be somewhat similar to the people. And then there's this question of, okay, we're having the Fachkräftemangel here in Germany, there's the skill shortage, seeing that we all know that we go to these meetups and we meet a lot of actually unemployed technical people looking for jobs, and at the same time, there's a lot of companies looking for people. And I somehow feel it comes down to this snowflake problem. You could also say that generative AI makes coding more democratic and more accessible to a wider number of people. For example, business and finance people are going to be able to write queries a lot easier now than they would have 2 years ago. What do you think about that?
Yes, no, maybe, right? I'm experienced in the sort of modeling part of things. I'm a little bit experienced in the production deployment part and all that. But just because now there is generative AI and the coding assistance, I'm not going to turn into a full stack software developer or something like that. So that still takes time, experience, domain expertise, and all that stuff. So if there is that unrealistic expectation, then there is the misalignment, right? So that's my take on it. And again, what I wanted to highlight is that the technology landscape is super broad, and the companies should be ideally, the companies, the departments, the teams should be in a position where, okay, this is what we need, this is our use case, and this is the particular skill, expertise that we need, and so on and so forth. So as long as there is not that strategy, there's always going to be this like, oh, we can't find people, oh, we can't find jobs. So, but that's from the company perspective. From the sort of developer perspective, again, I think there are going to be individual differences, right? So how do you want to use this technology to further your skills? Do you want to learn something new? How talented are you in terms of using or exploiting, using this technology to enhance your skills or learn new skills? Yeah, that's not the other side of the coin, I would say.
Yeah, and a slightly, I guess, I agree with what you said, and then I would also say from a job seeker perspective, most companies that say that they want you to do 8 million things in one job, especially in things like data engineering, data science, etc. They might also say, oh, you should use generative AI, but any company that is saying that probably has no idea what they're actually doing. Tons of companies are constantly asking for whatever the next hype thing is. These are probably Berlin startups. I've worked at a number of them that were all, unsurprisingly hype, like many. And I think it's just places will always say this, oh, we need this thing, we need this thing. But they're just trying to get funding and actually and they are trying to find use cases and have no idea what they're doing. Because if they actually knew this, they would just have someone who worked there already start to do it, not try to use these signals to others that they're in on the hype as well. So that's just my slightly dark perspective.
Just as somebody who's been the Berlin scale-up person hiring people, I do think that if you want to hire people well in the market and build a sustainable team in a scale-up, you do have to have a data strategy. And I think for anyone who's looking for a job in the Berlin startup scene, if you have one of these companies that have 8 technologies, it might be like what Sam said in terms of the hype, and they're just trying to, they're not having a strategy. They want to get a very technical person who they could just ask to do stuff. But if they do have a very good strategy, they're going to know the type of skills that they want to hire. I feel like there's 2 worlds in this country, at least from my perspective. There's this Berlin startup scene, and we're sitting here right now, so it feels like it's the world to us. But when we leave that, we go to German corporates, it's a very different world. And I feel like, when you leave that, you get into this world where people want you to, in a way, understand their stack, and usually that's SAP or Oracle or something like that. And so you should be bringing lots of years' experience in these technologies. They want you to have very long stints on your CV and all of these sorts. It would be great in Germany if there'd be more fluidity between the scale-ups and the corporates, that maybe people who have been in the scale-ups could go to a corporate and work there for some time and bring their experience, and the corporates would be very open to onboarding these people and also training them up on SAP and these sorts of things. And I have to say the scale-ups and the startups should be very open to people from the corporates, because the corporate people are bringing a lot of skill sets in terms of scalability and industrialization.